Israel just assassinated one of Hamas's top leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, while he was in Iran. Here are 3 things you need to know. First, if anyone is still operating under the illusion that Israel wants peace, or that they're negotiating for a ceasefire in good faith, or that they actually care about whether or not they get their hostages back, you need to drop that immediately. Ismail Haniyeh was one of Hamas's lead negotiators in the ceasefire talks. Israel just killed him. By definition, you can't be serious about a negotiation if you assassinate the other side's negotiator when he goes home at night. We've actually known from day one that this was never about peace or hostages because Israel's leading generals and politicians were saying there were no innocent civilians in Gaza, that they were going to destroy every piece of infrastructure in Gaza, that they were going to wipe Gaza off the face of the earth. But if that wasn't clear enough, assassinating the very person they're supposed to negotiate a peace agreement with should make it clear beyond a doubt that Netanyahu never wanted a deal. Not to mention, he did this at a time when the 2 sides were reportedly close to coming to a deal. 2. Israel is trying to start a regional war. Looking at what they've done in just the last month, it's hard not to interpret it as anything but that. They've bombed Yemen, they've bombed Syria, they've been bombing Lebanon for months. Yesterday they assassinated a top military general in its capital. And now today, they've assassinated one of Hamas's lead negotiators in the capital of Iran. Israel knows that as soon as their wars end, they'll have to answer to their crimes. So their solution? Start an even bigger war. This is the mentality we're dealing with here. And finally, this assassination shows that Israel still has no idea who they're fighting against. It's almost like Israel's fallen victim to its own propaganda. In their eyes, Hamas is something that's being imposed on the Palestinian people without any roots in society. And that if you take out their leaders, Palestinians will finally be free of the rule of Hamas, and they'll come running to Israel with open arms. Hamas is a byproduct of Israel's occupation. Hamas is what you get when you commit genocide against an entire people, ethnically cleanse their land, build settlements on top of their graves, and then kill them when they speak out. If Israel thinks that killing Hamas's leaders will actually stop Hamas, all they need to do is think back to all the other times they assassinated leading members of Hamas. In 1996, Israel assassinated Hamas's military leader, Yahya Ayash. In 2004, they assassinated Hamas's founder, Ahmed Yassin. A month later, they assassinated Yassin's successor, Abdelaziz al-Rantisi. In January of this year, they assassinated a senior Hamas official, Saleh al-Aruri. Did Hamas collapse after any one of these assassinations? Did it cease to exist? No. In fact, it probably just made people want to resist Israel even more. I want everyone to think back to Netanyahu's address to Congress a week ago. The main thesis of his speech was that Western civilization, meaning the United States and Israel, is now in a civilizational war with radical Islam, meaning Iran. In the conclusion of his speech, he thanks the US for deploying its military to protect Israel during Iran's retaliatory attack against Israel in April, but he said it wasn't enough. Netanyahu's proposal was to widen an anti-Iran alliance into a military relationship, which he called the Abraham Alliance. His parting message was this.
My friends, if you remember one thing from the speech, remember this. Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight. And our victory will be your victory.
I want everyone to think about this very carefully. He says, Israel's enemies are our enemies. No, they are not. Our enemies are not Israel's enemies. That is to say, our enemies are not the tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian men, women, children that have been slaughtered in Israel's wars. Our enemies are not in Iran. Our enemies are not Muslims. Our enemies are the war makers. Our enemies are the ones who are showering a genocidal state with weapons, aid, money, and then turn around and tell us that there's no money for schools. Our enemies are the ones who are profiting off of Israel's genocide, who are profiting off of all of these wars, while millions of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Not even a week after his speech, Benjamin Netanyahu is doing everything he can to start a regional war and drag the US into it, and Congress is just going along with it. Kamala Harris even called Israel's assassination in Lebanon self-defense. Israel's been able to get away with all this precisely because of the political protection from US politicians. But just remember, That support is entirely contingent on how feasible they perceive supporting Israel to be. If politicians felt that the political price for supporting Israel was so great that it would cost them their careers or their rule, the relationship with Israel would stop overnight. So far, the movement for Palestine has undermined support for Israel to its lowest point ever. Now is not the time to stop.